everyone. This is Margaret Manning with 60 and Me. This is the place where women over 60 come to be inspired. My guest today is Kathleen Petticord. Kathleen is the founder and publisher of Live and Invest. It's a fabulous publication that talks about living and retiring abroad. Kathleen has been traveling the world for the last 30 years and has some great suggestions on things to consider when looking to perhaps live abroad. Hi, Kathleen. Welcome.
Hello, how are you? Thank you for inviting me. It's good to be here.
Oh, it's so good to have you here. I am so excited to talk to you because I'm so jealous, for one thing, that you're sitting there in Panama City. And also that you just really do a great job, Kathleen, of educating people about, the choices they have when they're considering retiring or investing abroad. So, we have a group of about 50,000 women in our 60 and Me community, and they live all over the place. But I think they all, not all, but many, when they get into their 60s, are, think about what life might be like in another place. So we all do our research. We choose the countries that we have a passion for. We choose the part of the world, and, we make the decision, and then we get there. And what happens?
And you hope it's what you expected and wanted it to be. But actually, I think I just gave away the answer. I think kind of the bottom line point is, I said, you hope it's expected it is what you expected it to be. And I will tell you, it's not going to be what you expected it to be. So what I recommend is your expectations behind. Bring no expectations with you. If you don't come expecting something, you can't be disappointed or frustrated or upset or worse. It's better to come with a very open mind and a sense of humor. And there are such big upsides to this. There are so many great reasons to do this, but on the ground, day to day, at ground level, it's hard. It can be hard. It can be really frustrating.
Well, I know the advice you gave in another video we did was about, just not only just going with no expectations, but actually going there first if you can. And if it's a place that you can visit, and that's probably actually something that everybody would want to do anyway. But, walk the streets, go to the shops, get on the buses, and then kind of anticipate what your normal day would be like.
Going to look like. Exactly.
But tell us some of the funny things that have happened to you that have given you an awareness, like, just silly things like language, for example.
Well, language is the obvious one. It's the minute you arrive in the airport in this new country, unless it's an English-speaking country, Belize, Ireland, New Zealand are all great choices. But beyond a short list of choices like that, the language is going to be different, which means even if people you encounter, say at the airline counter or the restaurant staff or the banker you deal with, they may speak English, but most people on the street won't. The taxi drivers probably won't. And signs won't be in English. Newspapers won't be in English. Documents won't be in English. When you go to open an account at the bank, the information, the form you're filling out won't be in English. So this is obvious. It's a statement of the obvious, but try to, be prepared for what that means. Day after day of that, it can mean that you feel suddenly like the world is moving beneath you, like your knees have been chopped off because nothing makes sense. Nothing is easy. On the one hand, the very practical side effect of this is it's tiring. It's exhausting to deal with life in another language until you become more comfortable with it. And then there are the funny parts of the language, which are you're going to say all kinds of things which won't be what you really mean and no one will understand, and that's all okay. You have to just put yourself out there and be able to laugh at yourself and not worry that you said something completely different from what you meant and maybe even really ridiculous. That's okay. It'll happen a lot.
Well, I think people appreciate it too when you have a go, when you just try. So, I live in Switzerland, which is a German-speaking country. And so I've learned some of the basic words and, people, you can see that they're smiling as I'm mispronouncing, but they appreciate it. So it's cool.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so the phrase, English is widely spoken should be taken very broadly.
Definitely. And I know you see that on the internet. I'll admit we use it in our publications sometimes. And even in places where English is widely spoken, it's not going to be 100% spoken. And here's an important thing. Even if the people you deal with, they speak English, they might not really speak real English. And that means that they won't really understand you. So they won't get nuance. They aren't going to know your slang. They aren't going to know the vernacular or vocabulary from whatever part of the English speaking world you come from. They aren't going to get your jokes. Don't try to, humor is one of the most dangerous things when you're dealing with a language barrier. So even though they technically do speak English and they could write out a letter in English even, or, speak to you in English, they aren't really going to understand the nuance of what you're saying. And that's where a lot of lost in translation happens.
Okay, so what else might happen when we get to this place that we're not expecting? What other things might surprise us?
Well, one of the things that surprised me most when I started spending time in Central America, which is a place where a lot of American retirees, especially Americans, might be thinking about coming. So nearby, it's sunny, it's affordable, there's lots of beaches, a lot of things that someone at this stage of life is looking for. But when I first started spending time here, and even still today, you have to be prepared for the very underdeveloped infrastructure. So, for example, I've been coming here a long time, and my son is now 16, but he started coming to Panama when he was just a few months old. He made his first trip here. One time when he was 2 years old, he and I went out on the street to hail a taxi, take taxis a lot. We got in, sat down with Jack, his name is Jack, on my lap, and looked down, and there was a hole big enough for Jack to fit through in the floor of the taxi. And so we're driving along, and I can see the street, the highway underneath us, and you can see the undercarriage of the car. So I held on to Jack the whole time. But, taxis sometimes don't have handles. They often don't have brake lights. They might have windshield wipers. The windows might not close. I got in a taxi here in Panama City just the other day. It's the rainy season. When the rain comes, it can be torrential. The window in the taxi didn't close, so that meant the rain's just coming in, beating in on you. So you have to be prepared for underdeveloped infrastructure in a way that I think most Americans just can't even imagine until you experience it.
You become very adaptable. I know in countries like India, for example, all you need on a car is a horn. Like, you don't even need a light. And, that horn serves you well. And there's a whole language of horn blowing that gets you through the day.
Exactly.
So what else? I guess that the people that you might have helping you in your home have a different idea about your house, or maybe, different habits. I mean, how.
Definitely. And, it's very common in this part of the world to have household help.
Yes.
Every apartment, every house comes with maid staff quarters, a room for the maid, and even a driver. And many people here would have one or two maids, a driver, and a gardener. It's not uncommon. And it can be one of the perks of being in this part of the world, because it can be very affordable. And it's really nice to have someone do the chores. So the more chores they do, the less chores you have to do. That's really nice. But, what you're going to find is they have different ideas about everything. Their life experience is, completely opposed to yours, completely different from yours to this point. And so their ideas about even what you've hired them to do about cleaning and levels of cleanliness and all of that are going to be very different. Right. Their ideas about personal space are going to be very different, And I have a friend who's been retired in Ecuador for several years, and he tells a story about getting on a public bus to take a trip to somewhere else. He lives in Cuenca, to somewhere else in the country. And a teenage girl, an Ecuadorian girl, got on, sat down next to him. They never met, didn't know each other, put her head on his shoulder and fell asleep and slept the entire 4-hour bus ride. When they arrived, got up and waved at him and left, and didn't give that a second thought. So the people who you encounter and people who you might work, employ with as household help or what have you, they're going to have very different ideas about relationships and personal space.
I think that goes to another idea, though. They also have queuing, for example. When you queue for a bus or you queue for a train, that, it's a different idea of queuing that we might be used to.
There is no idea of queuing. It just doesn't exist. It's not a thing in the culture. And, Americans and Europeans take that seriously. It's very rude not to pay attention to your place in the queue.
It's so true.
But in this part of the world, they just don't. And in Asia as well, it doesn't exist. And I went to the movies just recently here in Panama City, and I was with my son, and we were late. We were waiting in line. It was a long line, but it's kind of not a line. It's a group. It's a mob, and it's a crowd, exactly. And so I am reluctant to just push my way ahead. I try to find some formal, organized way to be in the crowd, but but people were just in front of me, in front of me, in front of me. And finally, my son said, "Mom, we're never going to get
Just
tickets
go
this
for
way.
it.
You just have to go up to the counter." And that's true.
I don't know, it's the same in Asia. We're talking right now, by the way, about Panama because you live in Panama City, but I think everything you said, everything we've talked about so far could apply to Asia, Thailand, India, of course, or not so much in the European countries. There is that maybe common understanding of what a queue is, but
Right.
there still are processes though around getting tickets, buying things that take longer in certain countries.
Definitely. Well, in much of Latin America, Central and South America, people pay their bills in person. So you go to a little kiosk to pay your electric bill or your cable bill. And so you know, on the days of the month when those things are due, that typically, you know, say the bills payments are due the 15th of the month. Well, the 14th and the 15th of the month, you might go and wait 2 hours or longer to be able to pay your electric bill. And an American isn't going to be prepared for that. You know, in the United States and in Europe, you pay your monthly bills online. It's on direct debit for the most part. It's auto pay. You certainly don't think you're going to spend 2 hours to pay your electric bill.
You know, I think this has been a really great snapshot of what life is when you get to these beautiful countries that we read so much about, and we're absolutely positive it's the right place for us to be. We visited, we've talked to people, but then when you get there and you close that door to your apartment or your house, you know, life changes. And
Yeah.
so what are some of the qualities, Kathleen, that you would say a person has to have?
You need to be flexible. I think you were starting to say
Yeah.
flexibility, and I think that's everything. You need to be flexible, you need to have an open mind, and you really need a sense of humor. You need to not be the person, and this I speak from experience because this is hard. This is the hardest thing for me still after all this time. Not the person who drives or walks down the road and looks at the four construction guys standing around a hole with shovels and thinks, what are they doing? There's a better way to do that. Why are four men standing around that hole with shovels? This is ridiculous. They're blocking traffic. Look at this long traffic jam, and they're not even doing anything. And you can't be that person. You have to drive by and think, oh, well, that's what they're doing. You don't know why they're doing it the way they're doing it. Maybe there's an easier way with a certain piece of equipment, but they don't have that equipment. Maybe they had it and it broke and they can't get the part to repair it. If they had that equipment, it puts those four guys out of work. And this is just how it's
Yeah.
always been done in this place. So this is how they do it. They're going to do everything differently than you're used to, from road repairs to how they celebrate Christmas and their children's birthdays. Everything will be different, and you need to see that as, hey, wow, look at how they do this. This is different. This is interesting. Not, what are they doing? That's not how you do that.
Yeah. Well, this is the balance, isn't it? I mean, I think when you go to another country, you have to respect them for what they are. And I think you said something just at the very beginning of that piece of the conversation where you can't expect you could do it better. You know,
Right.
because you maybe you could, but then it's not that you're only a guest there. You are living there. You can contribute, but there's an infrastructure, there's a culture that you have
Exactly.
to abide
You have
with.
to fit yourself into, not imagine that you're going to adjust the whole local culture to suit you. You're going to have to adjust yourself to fit into the local culture.
Okay, Kathleen, I hope that everyone who is planning to relocate to retire somewhere else or to invest in another country listens to this podcast, because I think it really has given, I think, a great understanding of what life really is like when you make that decision. So thank you so much for your advice. And I want to mention your website, which I really highly recommend, and your e-letter that you send out with such great information. Live and invest overseas.
Yep.
And .com, and we'll
Dot
put
com.
we'll put that information in the article. But I really appreciate your time, and thanks a lot for being here.
Thank you very much. It's great to talk to you.
Thank you.